Welcome to Tech Bites with Dan Hafner, your gateway to the future of innovation and technology. Dive into the exciting world of software where cutting-edge tech meets creativity. Explore no-code solutions that empower businesses to thrive without traditional barriers. Hear inspiring stories from tech pioneers and industry leaders who are changing the game. Join us on Tech Bites and transform the way you think about technology and business.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. My name is Dan Hafner. I have another special guest on today. We're going to talk about rage quitting. We're going to talk about tech entrepreneurs. This is a very, very exciting conversation I'm ready to dig into. I think this will be very interesting and timely for a lot of people out there. I know there's a lot of people who think about this probably on a daily basis. If you look at all the stats about how many people are dissatisfied with their jobs, we're in the midst of this, what they call the Great Resignation. I feel like I was years ahead of that. Maybe my guest Paul was as well. But this is very exciting. So if you guys are out there, you're looking to, maybe start something new, you have an idea that's been simmering in the back of your head, you're really sick of your job, this might be the episode for you. I have a good friend of mine that I might actually share this episode with before it's even live, because I know he's kind of in the same boat. So yes, absolutely. So, all right. Well, anyways, before I get into that, thank you all for listening to the show. Please like and subscribe. Please share anytime you get the chance to, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. That is really, really appreciated to just help the growth of this show. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Paul Byrne. He is the founder of a platform called Razoyo. We're going to get more into that as well, but he's a fellow rage quitter. So welcome to the show, Paul. How are you, man?
Thanks, Dan. It's good to meet you. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on here. So, I've said this term several times. So why don't you give us a little bit of background? How did you get to where you are with the whole rage quitting thing? Like just lay it on us, man. What happened there?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you. I turned 60 this year, and so I have a pretty long backstory, I guess you could say, at this point in my career. But I started my career after my MBA in Europe, and I was working for a German company, and then from there I was recruited by PepsiCo, and they brought me back to the States, and I worked for Pizza Hut corporate headquarters in marketing, and I was in charge of database marketing, which is what we called it at the time, which mainly dealt with systems that would print specific coupons on the receipt that they put on the top of your pizza box. And then we had outbound telemarketing programs that you really wouldn't know about unless you ate too much pizza at one point and then stopped, because those were the people that we were calling. But that kind of, and I'd always had kind of an interest in technology to a certain extent. So while I was working what I would consider, sort of standard, advertising positions, I was a senior vice president of business development at a medium to large size advertising agency in the Dallas area. I won't say the name because they change names, like they change their underwear. So so probably people wouldn't recognize it. It eventually became part of Publicis at some point along the way. And then the .com bubble burst, and then Enron happened. And then of course the Gulf War happened. So there was 9/11, all the fallout from that and the war and so forth. And that really shook up, and the internet itself really shook up the advertising business. So I found myself in a position like a lot of advertising executives that I was out of a job I think this would have been early 2002. And I ended up getting sort of an offer to come collaborate with an old boss from Pizza Hut, who was part of a company that I won't mention because it's the one I rage quit from. But in this company, I became the chief marketing officer. And so I was with them for 7 years. And to be honest, like the first 4 or 5 years were great. And then the company structure changed, our business model changed. And I found myself dealing with a lot of people that I just really didn't like dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And was very, very frustrated. And so I was on a phone call and I was kind of getting raked over the coals for something that had happened. And to be honest, it was probably my fault. I don't know. I don't remember, but certainly I felt like I was being mistreated. And I just kind of, yeah, I'd been working really hard, helping them, be successful. And I was just like, this just isn't worth it. And so in the middle of the call, I just hung up and I turned around, opened up my laptop, sent my boss an email and said, hey, effective immediately, I quit. And then I got up and left. And yeah, so, to be honest, like the hardest part of that experience was on that drive home, trying to explain to my wife why I was now unemployed. That was probably the most difficult one, but she is great. And, she was definitely frustrated, not really understanding like what was going on in my head, why I would do that, put our family at risk. And I just, but very supportive of me, always has been. And so, we kind of worked through it. For sure. Honestly, it never really became an issue in our marriage or anything. Yeah, it was just, but I could sense her frustration. And so, that was probably the only real downside to the whole thing was that. And I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. I had a friend who had a company that was in the data entry business, and the data that we were inputting into this, or that he was inputting into the system, could be used for marketing purposes, but it was not. And so he brought me on and I kind of helped him develop this marketing campaign, and we were reselling to, these folks who had contact with the sales force of the company that we were contracting with. They allowed us to sell their stuff online. And it turns out that client was the company that I had just rage quit from. And so they became, so this friend invited me to join him in this business. I did. We became partners, and the business kind of took off. So it was, we started gaining momentum, and back then, like, we really didn't know what we were doing. And a few years later, he was heading up the data entry side of the business, and I was heading up the e-commerce side of the business. And it just, the data entry side of the business was going down. People were using iPads and iPhones to capture data, and like that side of the business was just kind of definitely in a shrinking market. And so he decided to leave the business, and I bought out his half. And so, in 2014, maybe it was earlier than that, around 2014, I became the sole owner of this business that had about, I think, less than 10 employees at the time. But it was a great business to be in. It was growing. And so we were in e-commerce at that point. So Razoyo is not really a platform. We build platforms for companies, but we're a software consultancy. So we started off in e-commerce, but for the past 5 years, in addition to the e-commerce, we've been building SaaS platforms. And so we have a couple of our own that we run, and then we build them for clients as well.
That's great. And do you guys see why he was such a good fit now, coming full circle?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So, well, before we get into that, it's funny you mentioned like the whole downside of things was the spousal thing.
Exactly.
I went through that as well.
Yeah.
What actually worked for me was I had actually written call it a business plan, call it like it wasn't even just like a business plan for the business. It was like a life business plan of like, hey, like this is what we're doing. This is why I'm doing this. And and I put it on a magnet right on the fridge, and it was like, here's where by this date I'm going to be doing this and doing that. I don't think I actually fulfilled the promise that I made on there.
You had a
Uh,
plan.
but I had a plan, right? I had a plan. So like that's my question is, and maybe you just answered that, was like, if someone's out there listening and they're like, you know what, like I have been thinking about like getting the hell out of here. This isn't worth it. This sucks. I got an idea. I want to do something with. Want to start an agency. Want to start a business. Want to do whatever. What would you recommend? What would you say to them?
So I did not have a specific plan. For a while, I had been thinking about being independent, running my own business of some kind. I had several ideas that had run across folks, but nothing. I didn't have a specific business plan for any of them at that point. But I had, as part of this, knowing that I wanted, what I call the fourth quarter of my career, which I was entering at the time, which I'm well into now. I wanted that to be a entrepreneurial. And so I had been saving up money, enough to give myself enough time that I had options, and that I could try this out, and in the worst case, I would have gone back into a corporate type job and just done that again. Certainly could have done that. I don't think I could do that now.
Yeah.
Right. That would be very, very difficult for me now that I know how to run a business and I know the advantages of that and I'm just used to it. I'd probably rage quit day one if I had to work for somebody else at this point. But I didn't have a plan, but I did have a cushion and I knew that it was going to be there. And fortunately, I didn't eat up that cushion. Was able to kind of, tighten our budgets and at the same time grow revenues to the point where at least for those first critical years, because most businesses, when you start a business, the first few years, you're going to have some cash flow, issues to deal with.
Yeah.
And, and there were a number of times, thanks to that cushion, I wasn't freaking out when, I had a couple of clients that were paying late or, we had a cash crunch in the business and, my partner and I, and later just I was able to skip my own payroll, but pay everybody else out. So, nobody on my team knew, that had happened, that I had made that sacrifice, I guess, for the team. So, for them it was all smooth and that's how you want it to be. Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to get the rewards, you need to be the one taking the risks.
Yeah. So what I hear, and combining this with my experience as well, is have a plan, number one, have a cushion, number two, and then have patience, number three. I think is like my big takeaways there. Because I think that's not an uncommon thing I've heard of, is like skipping your own payroll, just kind of being like, well, I'll kind of not take a lot of money off the table because we need to get this thing going, but. Okay. So here you are, you're like, I'm going into fourth quarter. I want to be more entrepreneurial. I don't have a plan. Like I didn't quit to like start this.
The rage quit. Yeah.
Yeah. So then how did you land on this idea that you're now doing? Was this the very first thing that worked? Was there other things that failed before? Like what happened in that transition period?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in the beginning, I was in the data entry business and I wasn't sitting at my desk typing. That's not what I was doing. We had contracts with a number of clients who would send us, so restaurants that had, with your check, you would get a birthday club form invitation, before people had smartphones, right? This was 2009. So before a lot of people had smartphones, et cetera, they would write it in on this postcard, essentially. It would get collected by your server, then every week the restaurant would send those, and those would come to our warehouse. And then we had a system for tracking every single piece of paper that went through the company. And we would put these into batches. We would have data entry software available to really what amounted to, dozens and dozens of stay-at-home moms, mostly, that were doing the data entry, in the evening when their kids were in bed. I had one who was really super aggressive. She was super fast, and we paid piecework, and she was, very accurate. And after working for us for about 18 months, she drove up in a new Honda Odyssey, and she's like, "Hey, this was my whole plan." So she still wanted to keep working, even though she had her car. But we were dealing with that. So we had all these people coming to the business office, picking up these batches of data entry, stacks of cards to be data entered. They would do them at home, and then after a week they'd come back and pick up a new batch, and that was that business. So I was really kind of on the business development side, and we ended up doing work for the Federal Reserve, for a number of advertising agencies that did events. Like they would go to a soccer game, and you could enter a sweepstakes, or you could ask for an insurance quote, whatever it was, right? All that stuff was coming into us.
So wait, now time out. So you said you were working with the Federal Reserve and big advertising agencies. This was in your W-2 job, or this was with your business?
No, this was the business that I came into. Like, I was selling to the Federal Reserve. I was building relationships with advertising agencies. My partner was the one who was handling most of the logistics and managing the workforce. And I was kind of, doing more of the sales. So, yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't really tech at first, but then, we both were looking at all this data we had, and we're like, dang, would these companies like let us market their products to these folks, and like we could make some money on the sales? And that's how we did it. Is we started doing that. And that's how I got involved in e-commerce, and hence really tech, overall.
Yeah, good for you to be able to close deals like that early on. Like that's pretty awesome. I was going to say, like, how did you land those types of jobs? But it sounds like you maybe were just a pretty good sales guy and had some connections, huh?
I don't know. Like, to be honest, like, a lot of companies contacted us. I have no idea really how they found us, because our website was abysmal. So I'm not, like, it wasn't a lot of outbound selling. It was more of like, if somebody needed what we had, we were 90% close rate, on those. One of the interesting ones that we worked for, I don't remember the name of the organization, but they had canvassers that were taking donations and having people sign a petition so that California could change the law, and allow gay marriage in California. I can't remember. It was like Equity California, or Equality California, something like that. And that thing was huge. Like, we sold into them, and then we were doing the data entry that would charge people's credit cards. And so I had specialized folks who, had been vetted and trained, et cetera, to do that kind of work. And they were, that was really good business for us. It was high volume. It was low margin, but super high volume. We were getting like cases of paperwork in, several times a week.
So. Wow. Very interesting. So you basically, you didn't set out to build or to be a tech entrepreneur, but you kind of fell into that eventually.
Yeah, it was in the stars because of my background. I had, for the company that worked prior to that, the one I rage quit from, I had introduced e-commerce to them in the early days, early 2000s. And, so kind of I had been a bit of a pioneer in that. And so I was naturally going to drift in that direction.
Yeah. So tell us about the platform. Tell us about I keep calling it a platform, but tell us about the solution. I'm sorry, what was it called again?
The Razoyo?
Yeah. Razoyo, yes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've created several SaaS platforms at Razoyo. The first one we did was, so we were in the e-commerce business, and we were doing platform customizations for Magento, open source e-commerce software, right? And we could see that with Shopify and BigCommerce and some of these other platforms, SaaS platforms that were coming out, that, those days might be numbered in that, it's much better to work with a SaaS platform if you can get it to work with your business, simply because of, security issues. You're able to have you're able to have a lot of enterprise grade technology applied to your business that you wouldn't be able to afford if you're a smaller or medium sized merchant. We had merchants that were somewhere between, $1 million a year and $100 million a year. That was kind of the size of company that we were working with. And so we said, the way that people are making money in this is they're creating extensions for these SaaS platforms. And so we were looking for something that was rather niche, and a platform called BigCommerce came to us and they said, hey, we've got a lot of people in the online firearms space, and we want to develop, or they need a system that will help them automate compliance and checkout. And the basic principle of it is that there's a list of federally licensed firearms dealers in the United States. You cannot ship that firearm that you purchase online to yourself. It has to be shipped to one of them, and then they handle the background check and all of that. And so you have to choose from, a known list of places to ship these to. And so we developed a platform to do that, and a plugin for BigCommerce. And it started taking off. Like, we got, a couple dozen subscribers relatively quickly without doing anything. We had no idea how to market it. We really didn't, at that time. It was just the beginning days.
Sounds like the typical SaaS founder sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, hey, we can do this thing. And so, now it's on BigCommerce, it's the predominant solution, and it's also available on Magento, on WooCommerce. Shopify doesn't allow firearms merchants. I mean, they say they do, but they really, really don't. And so it's become pretty widely used. So that was our first platform. It was that, and that was, one that we owned and launched. I would say that we've really just learned how to market it in the past 6 months.
Wow.
And it's been around for about 4 years. And, and now, like, we're well known, everybody in the space. It was really, really frustrating that we would go to events for BigCommerce or for Magento or something, and we would introduce ourselves as Razoyo, because we worked on, our e-commerce business. We were working on those platforms, and we were customizing software for other folks. They had no idea who we were. And then we mentioned, oh yeah, and we built this thing called Automatic FFL. And they were like, oh, you're the Automatic FFL guys. Like, we were the Automatic FFL guys. So, that was when we had a big wake up call that, hey, we might want to improve the marketing of the Razoyo brand a bit. We should be known for that.
Interesting.
Yeah. But then right before COVID hit and lockdown started, my CTO, who is also my oldest son, was working in the company, and his wife worked for a company in the hotel space, and they were doing hotel revenue management with basically, they had an analysis tool, this company that she worked for, but it had to be used by what do you call them? Like a consultant within the business. And so it was an internal tool they were using to service clients, and they couldn't service that many clients. And we came in and we looked at the tool and we're like, hey, we could automate this. We can build a SaaS platform out of this. And, we didn't really know what we were doing. We had the experience of Automatic FFL, but we did have enough confidence in ourselves that we thought we could overcome any obstacles. And there were quite a few to making that happen, but we did make it happen. And now it has tens of thousands of daily users on the platform. It is number one on Hotel Tech Report. And so it's
hell yeah.
Yeah. So those kinds of success. And it was such a, I guess the thing, having listened to some of your prior podcasts, I think the thing that really worked out from there was just this tight integration and communication that we had with the client, because
Mhm.
they didn't know what they were doing. They were very open to having us, propose features, propose the way things work. They gave us a lot of free reign. So they gave us freedom, but we worked very closely together. There's just constant communication going back and forth. And so, that became successful. In fact, they were acquired by a much larger firm in in that space, and the owners, entrepreneurs, that founders that started that were pretty happy with that result.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, man. That's good for you guys. So, well, it's very interesting. Just I never thought about that until you said that. And this is good for any of you future founders out there or anything. Like, I love, as a fellow developer and agency owner, right? Like, I love working with a client who's just like you said, who's like, here's what we want to build, but we're flexible in the way that we get up there. I always use this analogy of there's a million ways to climb a mountain, right? There might be a path here, a path there. You go over a rock here, you go. There's a million different ways to get up the mountain, but at the end of the day, you end up at the top of the mountain, right? I've worked with people that are like that, and I've worked with people that are like, this is what it needs to look like
You're
and
going
do.
straight up the mountain.
There's one narrow path. There's one narrow path to that. And that in terms of building software is just, that's the hardest thing to do. And if you're building it for someone else, so be flexible, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a constant balance between suppressing creativity and maximizing efficiency. And so,
Tell me more about that.
yeah. So like you were saying, the flexibility, if you're inflexible, then you're going to lose out on a lot of great ideas that your developers, who have probably written a lot of software, know how to do, and know things that could add value that you might not be thinking about. Right. But if you don't, incorporate their ideas into your plans, then you're going to lose out on that creativity. Right. At the same time, you let your developers run wild, and you've got, a ballooning budget, and you're never getting a launch. So you've got, now fortunately, companies like us, I have enough business acumen, having been in business myself for long enough, that I can see when my team might be going in a direction that is not going to be efficient and is not going to pay off for the client in terms of their eventual ROI. So that's why I like to, kind of keep my fingers in the projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that balancing act, and you can't go too far one way. You can't go too far the other way. And the best way, I find, is just, communicating and challenging each other's ideas constantly, but inviting those ideas into the discussion.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting. Like you said, like you can either let people run wild or be very, I always think of the song, hold on loosely, but don't let go,
There you go.
Yeah, it's a good little reminder for you. But so, I mean, yeah, in addition to that though, like, do you have any interesting misconceptions? I always like to ask this question of people like who are actually have built and launched things like you guys have. What do you think is like the biggest misperception of you before you had like a SaaS platform, and then you after? I mean, you've already kind of told us like you had to learn the marketing kind of thing of it. Is there any more perceptions in terms of like, maybe having something like this is a lot more work than you might think it would be, or is it leading people is a lot harder than you thought it would be? I'm curious, like what do you think is like a misperception that you had early on that you were like, oh man, like I wish I'd have known that before I started this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say the answer to that question is constantly evolving in my mind. With the use of AI, a lot of expectations have changed from non-technical people about how technical work should be done. And a lot of frustration has grown up from technical people who wish those tools were better than they are. And so, to me, it's a little frustrating that there are a lot of companies out there trying to sell these no code tools or vibe coding tools or whatever you want to call them that claim that you can create a launchable, scalable product without really any technical knowledge. And that's just not true.
Amen, brother.
I have tested so many of those tools,
Amen, brother.
and I have been able to build applications with them, but only because I'm a developer. Right. Like they get you to the point where if you were, where I can see like, oh, this is a trap. Somebody who doesn't have the technical knowledge is going to screw this up and compromise their application. Right.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think, if you're on the non-technical side, you really want to pair yourself up with somebody who does have technical knowledge, but you don't want a prima donna. Right. And then on the technical side, you want to be open to using those tools. There are some that can be useful, but you have to be incredibly selective and recognize that like they're going to improve. I think we all thought that they were improving more quickly than they are, but they're not. But learn how to use them, because this is, I could do without it because I'm going to probably retire in the next 5 years. Right. But if you've got, 10 years or more left in your career, you better get on top of how that's going to change your life, because it is.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've been kicking around in my brain, because I definitely have, I'm definitely in that bucket, But yeah, I remember the first time I saw, these things like Replit or Lovable or something come out,
Replit, Lovable. My favorite is Data Button, because it actually has a planning process integrated into it, but they all have similar limitations.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, and I've come across the same exact ones, because that was instantly the thought that hit me was like, oh shit, this is completely going to ruin my entire business model, my entire thing. And to be honest, I'm with you. I really think that in the next 10 to 15 years, sure, like it'll really replace a lot of things. But I've taken even some of the tools that we've built using purely no code tools like Bubble, right, Adalo, those types of tools.
Or case
and I tried
tools
to replicate them using like a tool like Replit or Lovable, and you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. Because when it comes to the intricacies and the integrations and all these different things, those no code tools are still better than these vibe coding. But no, there's tons of value. There's tons of like the types of prototypes you can get going, the types of things you can get going are, and if you really are good at prompt engineering, sure, like you can create some really cool stuff. But like you said, can you build a super complex, multifaceted SaaS platform with it yet? No. You can build some landing pages. You can build some really cool stuff, but I don't think you can build like you said, like the whole firearms tracking system thing. Like, I don't think that's possible yet.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, but something you said kind of spurred a thought that I've had for many years. I've held, and just as an observation, as somebody whose career has spanned almost 4 decades now, is if your business model is like, it's not going to last very long. Our society.
Sorry, can you say
I
that
don't
again,
just mean
Paul?
yours, Dan. I mean in general. Like, you have a business model, and it's going to evolve. So even before artificial intelligence, just forget about that, right? Like in the 90s, I knew companies. I worked with a number of companies because I was in marketing, advertising, at the corporate level. And there were companies that were highly polished media planners, and they knew, they had all this math, and they had all these models, et cetera, that they had built to actually work on to plan for Pizza Hut or for Pepsi or whoever I was working with, to plan their media buys and all these different kind of impacts that they try to have. I was invited when I was at Frito-Lay for a while to attend a seminar called Risky Business, and it was by Dwight Risky, who was, I can't remember, Dwight or Dwayne, anyway, one of the two, and he had a system for measuring the impact of advertising, and what you learn was that it's very, very difficult. It changes all the time. And this was before, new media, internet, YouTube, et cetera, was really, a consideration. And even then, we could do tests and run models, but I would say 2/3 of the time, the test was inconclusive. You had to try something else. And by the time you figured it out, right, then you didn't know what was going on. Sorry for that tangent. But this whole class of people that were excellent at media planning are all out of jobs now. That job doesn't even exist anymore, right? The business doesn't exist anymore because it's been entirely automated. And this is just what happens, right? From the Industrial Revolution to the information revolution to, now the AI revolution, things are just become outdated and not useful anymore. That's why we don't have buggy whip companies and so forth. So your business model, if it's based on today's equivalent of horse and buggy, even though that may be predominantly how people get around, it's not going to last very long, right? And you have to think about, how is this going to change? And even the small businesses have to be aware of it, right? They have to know, how is this going to affect my business? And you have to constantly think about that.
Yeah. If you guys listened to the last episode, this might be a repeat for you, but I love the quote right now of Wayne Gretzky. You got to skate where the puck's going to be, not where it is. So I'm sorry for that repeat, but it's so applicable. And it just like what he said, it's go where it's going to be, not where you're at. Don't get stuck in your head in the sand there. So, awesome.
I've pivoted our company 3 times, from data entry to e-commerce to, SaaS application development, to essentially the 4th time where we're actually, creating and running our own SaaS applications. And I expect there's at least one more before I'm done.
Yeah. Probably. Maybe 1 or 2. Who knows?
Maybe 2. I don't know. Yeah. Things are moving fast now.
Things are moving very fast. So, all right, Paul. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here. Where can we go to find either connect with you, find out more about what you're doing? Where can we go?
Yeah, so the best place is razoyo.com. It's RAZOYO.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. I'm PWBYRNE. So just look me up, and if you mention the podcast, I will definitely accept your connection invitation and be happy to communicate with you. LinkedIn, I'm on there every day, so that's really kind of the best way, the first approach to get in touch with me.
Awesome, man. All right, we'll have all those links for you guys in the show notes here, wherever you're listening or watching this. But yeah, man, Paul, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate the story. I know there's plenty more we could talk about, but we don't have 2.5 hour style podcasts on this show, at least anyway. So
yeah,
this has been really cool. I think for anyone out there thinking about rage quitting or starting their own thing, hopefully we gave a few takeaways, gave a few, hey, maybe think about things a little bit more. But sometimes in life, you just got to go for something. You got to trust yourself. You got to have a little faith, and just go for it.
If you haven't screamed YOLO once in your life, you're not doing it right.
Outside of spring break, that is.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that is it. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you on here. As always, guys, thank you for listening and joining. Please like and subscribe to the show, and share this episode with anyone you think might have value or find value from it. We'll talk to you guys next time. See you then.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for tuning in to Tech Bites, your go-to show for software business and technology. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest episodes, insights, and stories. Hungry for more? Dive deeper into the world of no-code by visiting dapanacode.com. Your journey to building amazing software without coding skills starts there. Connect with like-minded creators and unlock a world of resources tailored just for you. Subscribe now. Explore